The sky above Earth shimmered with a strange, unnatural glow. It wasn't a comet, nor was it a meteor streaking across the atmosphere. No, this was something far more unusual. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a massive ship appeared out of nowhere, breaking through the clouds with terrifying speed. At first, the people on Earth thought it was a military test, or perhaps a satellite malfunctioning. But when the object slowed, hovering just above the ground, all their assumptions turned to dread. The ship was like nothing they had ever seen before. Its shape was jagged, uneven, as though it had been hastily constructed. It didn't gleam with advanced technology like Earth's spacecraft. Instead, it looked old, battered, and broken, as if it had traveled the stars for centuries, running from something it couldn't escape. The first communication Earth received was not a greeting, but a signal, a simple transmission. We seek shelter. The enemies of our kind are coming. Help us, or we all perish. The message repeated itself, growing louder and more desperate with every cycle. No one knew who was sending it or what it meant. But one thing was clear: the Forsaken were asking for sanctuary. Panic swept across the globe. Governments scrambled to figure out how to respond. Scientists and military officers examined the signal, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. They were not the only ones receiving the message. The transmission had spread across the entire world in minutes. The question on everyone's lips was simple: should they help these strangers or turn them away? Inside a secure bunker in Washington, D.C., world leaders gathered. The room was filled with tension, each face showing a different emotion. Some were skeptical, others were frightened, but all of them knew that this was a pivotal moment. The decision they made could either protect Earth from something far more dangerous or invite destruction upon them. The Forsaken had arrived. They were a mysterious people from another galaxy, seeking refuge from enemies who were as relentless as they were unknown. No one knew what had led them to Earth or how they had found it. But the message was clear: if they didn't get help soon, they would be wiped out. But who were these Forsaken, really? Carter, a seasoned military officer, watched the feed from his command post. His brow furrowed as he studied the image of the ship. It was unlike anything he had seen before, crude, patched together, but still somehow surviving. The ship's occupants were even stranger. The transmission showed only fleeting glimpses of their faces, pale, hollow-eyed, and filled with terror. There was no doubt they were running from something far worse than just space pirates or rogue forces. We can't ignore them, Carter thought to himself. But deep inside, he felt uneasy. The Forsaken weren't just asking for protection. They were asking for humanity to make an impossible choice. To shelter them meant risking the unknown, but refusing them might mean the end of everything. Time was running out. The Forsaken were coming, and the world was about to face a decision that would determine humanity's future. Would they give them refuge, or turn their backs and face whatever horrors followed? The world was on edge. News outlets were flooded with images of the Forsaken ship hovering above Earth, its twisted and damaged form hanging ominously in the sky. The broadcasted message played over and over again, echoing through the ears of every person on the planet. We seek shelter. The enemies of our kind are coming. Help us, or we all perish. In Washington, D.C., the world's leaders gathered in a top-secret bunker, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. The situation was critical. Carter, a seasoned military officer, sat among them, his mind racing. He had seen war in all its horrors, but nothing like this. The Forsaken were alien in every way, and no one knew what kind of consequences helping them would have. The room buzzed with arguments. The president stood at the head of the table, trying to maintain control as the room fell into chaos. The debate was fierce, but the question was the same. Should humanity risk everything to protect the Forsaken? "We don't know who they are," shouted one of the generals. "What if they're a trap? We've seen alien invaders before. What if they're luring us into a false sense of security just to strike us down when we let our guard down?" "They're desperate," replied Dr. Emma Rivera, a leading scientist on the team studying the ship. The signal we intercepted was genuine. It's not a hoax. They're running from something. Something we can't even begin to comprehend. If we turn them away, what happens when their enemies arrive? Carter leaned forward, his gaze steady. It's a risk. I won't deny that. But right now, we're faced with a decision that's bigger than us. If we don't act, if we ignore their plea, we may be making the biggest mistake in human history. If we take them in and they're not what they seem, we're still betting our lives that we can defend ourselves. It's a gamble either way, but the question is, do we have the courage to make it? The president took a deep breath, clearly conflicted. He glanced at the video feed showing the Forsaken ship, which was now descending toward Earth, cloaked in a strange, otherworldly light. What happens if we accept them? The president asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. If we let them land, if we offer them sanctuary, what's the next step? Dr. Rivera answered, her voice steady despite the situation. We'll need to monitor their technology closely. We'll need to integrate their knowledge. If they're willing to share it, we could potentially learn things that could help us defend ourselves against whatever they're fleeing from. But it'll take time, and that's a luxury we might not have. And if we refuse them? Carter asked, his voice cutting through the tension. What if we shut them out? Do we risk bringing down an enemy we know nothing about? There was silence for a long moment as everyone in the room considered the weight of the decision. Outside, the sound of helicopters and military vehicles could be heard preparing for an emergency response. The tension in the air was palpable. Earth's defenses were ready, but the truth was, no one knew what they were defending against. Finally, the president spoke, his voice resolute despite the uncertainty. We'll give them shelter, but we won't do it blindly. We'll send Carter's team to meet them. He'll make the first contact. We're going to need answers before we take the next step. Carter nodded, though his stomach churned with apprehension. He had faced countless missions, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The Forsaken were asking for refuge, but there was more at stake than just offering a safe haven. They needed to know who these beings were, what they brought with them, and most importantly, what was following them. The first contact. Carter's team prepared to meet the Forsaken. They were armed, but this was not a mission for combat. It was a mission of diplomacy, something that felt foreign to the hardened soldiers. They suited up in their advanced protective gear and boarded a specially equipped transport that would take them to the site where the Forsaken ship had landed. The journey was tense. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the world was on the precipice of something monumental. His team, too, was silent, each of them lost in their thoughts, no doubt wondering about the same questions that weighed on his mind. Who were the Forsaken? What were they running from? And would this decision destroy humanity or save it? As they approached the landing site, Carter's mind raced. The Forsaken ship sat silently in the distance, now fully landed in a large barren field outside a major city. Its shape was monstrous, dark and uneven, like something pulled together by sheer desperation. No one knew how the ship had survived the journey through space or how it had managed to stay intact after everything it had endured. The team set up a perimeter, their weapons at the ready, but their eyes trained on the ship ahead. Slowly, the hatch of the ship opened with a hiss, and out stepped the first of the Forsaken. They were humanoid, but their features were disturbingly different. Their skin was a pale gray, their eyes too large, almost black, with no visible pupils. Their faces were thin, gaunt, as if they had been starved or weakened by their long journey. And despite their frailty, there was a sense of power emanating from them, something ancient and unsettling. The leader of the Forsaken stepped forward. His voice was low and strained, filled with the weight of what they had experienced. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough, yet filled with genuine gratitude. "You do not know how much this means to us. Our enemies are not far behind. They will not stop until we are wiped from existence. We seek only shelter." Carter eyed the Forsaken carefully. Despite their dire situation, there was something about the way they spoke that felt rehearsed, almost as if they were hiding something. Was this a plea for help? Or was it a calculated move to buy them time before something far worse arrived? "We need to know everything," Carter said, his voice firm. "Who are you? Who is hunting you? And why Earth?" The Forsaken leader hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the sky. "We are the last of our kind," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our enemies are an ancient race, more advanced than anything you can comprehend. They will follow us here, and when they do, Earth will be the next world they burn." The air grew cold with those words, and Carter felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. The Forsaken were not just refugees. They were survivors of an unstoppable force, and they were now asking humanity for help. The air was thick with tension as Carter and his team stood at the edge of the Forsaken ship. The leader of the Forsaken had just finished speaking, his voice grave, yet strangely calm. "The enemies we flee from are ancient," he had said. "They have destroyed countless worlds, and now they are coming for yours." The ground beneath them trembled, sending ripples of unease through the soldiers. Carter's gaze shifted instinctively to the sky. That's when he heard it, a high-pitched whine, followed by a series of screeches that seemed to cut through the very fabric of the air. It was impossible to mistake the sound. Something enormous was descending, and fast. "What the hell is that?" one of Carter's men whispered, his voice trembling with fear. Carter didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the dark shape that was growing larger in the sky, far too large for any aircraft they had ever seen. The sound grew louder, a menacing hum that vibrated through the air, almost as if the very atmosphere was alive. The Forsaken leader looked up as well, his face pale. "They're here," he said, his voice barely audible. "Prepare yourselves." Within seconds, the sky above them cracked open like thunder, revealing the silhouette of a massive ship. It was unlike anything Carter had ever seen, more like a floating city than a spacecraft. Its shape was jagged, its surface covered in twisted metal, organic structures that seemed to pulse with a sickly light. The ship was enormous, casting a shadow over the field where they stood. It was a ship of death, and it was descending to the ground. Carter's heart skipped a beat. He had been in combat for years, but he had never faced anything like this. The ship was alive. No, it was more than just alive. It was hunting. The Forsaken leader's face twisted with dread. "These are the Sprack," he said, his voice shaking. "They are relentless. They will destroy everything. You need to leave now. There's no hope of surviving unless—" His voice trailed off, and Carter noticed that the leader was trembling. Fear was a rare thing for a soldier, but the Forsaken were terrified, and whatever was in that ship was the cause. The massive ship descended even lower, its thrusters glowing an eerie red as it slowed its descent. Carter could see the shape of smaller crafts launching from it, their sleek forms streaking toward the ground with deadly precision. "Fall back," Carter ordered, his voice sharp, trying to snap his team into action. But his words barely made it past his lips before the Sprack's ships hit the ground. There was a burst of energy, a shockwave that sent Carter and his men tumbling to the ground. The sound of the blast was deafening, followed by the metallic screech of something large and dangerous landing nearby. When Carter opened his eyes, he saw the Sprack soldiers emerging from their ships. They were monstrous, tall and gaunt, their skin a sickly, mottled green, stretched taut over skeletal frames. Their eyes glowed with a fierce yellow light, and their mouths were filled with rows of sharp teeth. They looked like creatures pulled from the darkest corners of nightmares. Each one carried weapons that hummed with dark energy, weapons that could disintegrate anything in their path. Carter's team scrambled to their feet, weapons raised, but Carter knew it was futile. They were outmatched. The Sprack didn't need to make a move to show their superiority. Their presence alone was enough to freeze Carter in place. "There's nowhere to run," the Forsaken leader whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "This is what we've been fleeing. The Sprack don't stop. They'll annihilate everything until there's nothing left. Your world," His voice cracked. "Your world is next." Carter swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation crashing down on him. Earth had no chance against these creatures, not if they couldn't even put up a fight against the first wave. But then, a voice from his team spoke up. "Sir, look." The soldier pointed to the ground, where the Forsaken ship, though battered, was still intact. Carter could see it now. It wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, with technology that seemed almost beyond comprehension. It wasn't just their refuge. It was something more. A weapon. The Forsaken leader seemed to understand Carter's thoughts. "You must use it," he said urgently. "The ship, it has the power to fight the Sprack. But you need to activate it before they breach the hull. Hurry. There's no time." Before Carter could process the gravity of the situation, the ground shook again as the Sprack began to move forward. They weren't waiting for a battle to start. They were hunting, and they had already marked Earth as their next target. "We're not leaving you behind," Carter said, the decision already made in his mind. "We'll use your ship, but we need to act now." As Carter and his team rushed toward the Forsaken ship, the air around them seemed to warp. The Sprack's soldiers were moving faster now, closing in, their energy weapons charging. The Forsaken leader stepped forward, his voice filled with urgency. "You have to hurry. We've tried to activate the ship's core before, but it's broken. It needs the energy of your kind to power it. Only humans can unlock it. You are our only hope." The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and the sound of chaos as Carter's team rushed toward the Forsaken ship. Behind them, the Sprack forces were closing in, their weapons humming with dark energy, their monstrous forms relentless as they advanced. Carter's pulse hammered in his ears. They had to activate the ship's core. Now. The Forsaken leader's voice echoed in his mind. "Only humans can unlock it. You are our only hope." Carter didn't fully understand what that meant, but he knew one thing for certain. They were out of time. The Sprack were only moments away from reaching them. As his team reached the entrance to the Forsaken ship, Carter turned to his soldiers. "Get inside and hold the perimeter. I'll figure out how to activate this damn thing." He didn't wait for a reply before stepping forward into the ship, his weapon raised, scanning for any sign of movement. The ship's interior was like nothing Carter had ever seen. It was a labyrinth of organic metal, with walls that pulsed softly as if alive. The air inside was damp and cold, filled with an eerie hum, like the heartbeat of the ship itself. It wasn't just a vessel. It was something more, something ancient, something alive. Carter had to remind himself that the Forsaken had said it could fight the Sprack. But could humanity really control it? Carter moved quickly, trying to follow the path the Forsaken leader had shown him. As he rounded a corner, he saw the ship's core, a glowing, pulsating energy source embedded in the center of the ship, surrounded by a force field of unknown origin. It looked like a massive, swirling crystal, shining with an otherworldly light. The moment Carter's eyes landed on it, he felt an instinctive pull, a need to reach out, to unlock it. But there was a problem. The force field surrounding the core was impenetrable. Carter's heart sank. This was it. This was their only chance to survive. A scream rang out from behind him. Carter whipped around to see one of his soldiers, Corporal Jenkins, being thrown across the room by a blast of energy. The Sprack had breached the perimeter. They were already inside. The first wave of Sprack soldiers surged into the ship's corridors, their weapons firing powerful blasts of dark energy. The force field flickered, sparks flying off the edges. The Sprack didn't care about subtlety. They were here to annihilate everything. "Carter, we need to get out of here," another soldier yelled, his voice panicked. "We won't survive if we stay." But Carter couldn't back down. The Forsaken had begged for humanity's help, and if there was even a slim chance of using this ship to fight the Sprack, they had to take it. He turned to face the glowing core, his thoughts racing. How did they activate it? What did the Forsaken mean when they said only humans could unlock it? Then it hit him. The Forsaken had said the ship needed human energy to function, but he had assumed they meant power in the literal sense. What if it wasn't power that the ship needed, but something else? Carter stepped closer, hesitated for only a second, then placed his hand on the force field. The moment his fingers touched the barrier, a shockwave of energy surged through his body, knocking him back. He gasped, disoriented, but something inside him shifted. The glow of the core pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and a low hum began to fill the room. It was like the ship was alive, waiting for something or someone. "Carter, move!" Someone screamed again, but Carter's focus was locked on the core. He could feel it now, calling to him, connecting with him. The ship was testing him, drawing out something deep within him. And then the realization hit him hard. It wasn't just about human energy. It was about their will. The Forsaken had fled their enemies, but they hadn't truly unlocked the core because they didn't believe it was possible. Humanity had something they didn't: hope. Carter clenched his fist around the core's energy barrier. The ship seemed to respond to his determination, shifting and groaning as if awakening from a long slumber. He could feel the energy surging into his hand, filling his chest with a burning heat. The force field around the core flickered and began to fade. With one final, determined push, the force field dropped, and the core of the ship flared to life. The ship was ready. At that moment, a deafening roar echoed through the corridors of the ship. The Strack were closing in, their growls and battle cries reverberating off the walls. Carter turned to face the oncoming storm, a grin spreading across his face despite the odds. They weren't done yet. The core's energy rippled outward, and the ship's internal lights brightened. The walls hummed, vibrating with an immense power. Something inside the ship shifted as a massive control panel lit up before Carter. The ship was now alive, and it was ready to fight. The Strack warrior's massive form loomed through the smoke, its glowing yellow eyes fixed on Carter. Its energy weapon hummed with a deadly power, and the air crackled with anticipation. There was no time for hesitation. The Strack were here, and they were relentless. This was their moment, humanity's last chance to fight back. Carter's hand hovered over the control panel of the Forsaken ship, still pulsing with the raw energy of the core. He could feel the power thrumming beneath his fingers, like an extension of his own will. He had unlocked the ship's energy. Now it was time to use it. The Strack warrior snarled, its teeth bared, and fired. The blast tore through the air, but Carter was already moving. He dove to the side, rolling across the floor, and the blast missed by inches. It was time to fight back. "Take cover," Carter shouted to his team. He didn't have to say more. The soldiers scrambled, diving behind walls and pillars as another Strack blast scorched the air. Carter's eyes darted to the massive control panel. A series of holographic displays flickered before him. He could see the ship's internal systems, the core's energy readings spiking as it came online. The ship was ready for battle, but could they control it in time? The Strack warrior advanced, its steps heavy and menacing. The ground shook with each step. Carter's pulse quickened, but he didn't let the fear take over. He couldn't afford it. This was their last chance. The ship's console flickered again, and a series of holographic weapons interfaces appeared. Carter's hands flew over the panel, his fingers moving quickly. He needed a weapon, a power source, anything that could turn the tide. "Carter, we've got incoming," one of his soldiers yelled. The Strack were not alone. A group of smaller Strack soldiers surged into the room, their weapons crackling with dark energy, their eyes glowing like embers. The fight was escalating. Carter scanned the controls. His eyes caught something, a large energy cannon mounted on the underside of the ship, connected directly to the core. He could see it now. The weapon was ready to fire, but it was hidden behind layers of security protocols. He had to unlock it. "Cover me," Carter shouted, his voice fierce and commanding. "I'm going for the cannon." Without waiting for a response, he sprinted toward the weapon, his heart pounding in his chest. As he moved, Blasts of energy flew overhead, narrowly missing him. The Sprack were closing in fast, but Carter was determined. He couldn't let them destroy Earth without a fight. Not now. Not after everything they had sacrificed. The cannon's activation controls were just ahead, but the Sprack weren't going to make it easy. One of the soldiers lunged at him, its weapon raised. Carter acted instinctively. He ducked, his hand grabbing the soldier's arm and twisting it, forcing the Sprack to drop its weapon. Before the creature could react, Carter landed a powerful punch to its face, sending it crashing into the wall. "Keep moving," Carter shouted to his team. They were still taking cover, trying to hold back the Sprack forces. The air was thick with gunfire and explosions. Every moment felt like it could be their last. He reached the cannon's control panel and slammed his hand down on the activation switch. The ship's hum grew louder as the core's energy was funneled into the massive weapon. It was working. A blinding flash erupted from the cannon, a pulse of pure energy that cut through the room, obliterating everything in its path. The Sprack soldiers were thrown back, their bodies disintegrating in an instant. The ship's energy was like nothing Carter had ever seen, raw, untamed, and more powerful than any weapon on Earth. "Fall back," Carter yelled as the room started to shake. The ship's energy had triggered a massive overload, and the entire structure was beginning to tremble. They had activated the weapon, but it came at a cost. The Sprack warrior, still standing despite the blast, roared in fury. It raised its weapon once more, but before it could fire, another pulse from the ship's core blasted across the room. The warrior staggered, its armor glowing bright, but it was no match for the ship's newfound power. Carter didn't wait for the warrior to recover. He took a deep breath, his muscles coiling in preparation. "We finish this now," he shouted, and charged forward. The massive Sprack warrior fired another blast, but Carter was faster. He dove beneath the attack, rolling across the floor and coming up in a low stance. His weapon was still drawn, but it wasn't his gun he relied on. It was the energy from the ship, the power coursing through his veins, that gave him the strength to launch himself at the warrior. With a roar, Carter tackled the Sprack to the ground, his strength amplified by the ship's power. The warrior struggled beneath him, but Carter gritted his teeth and tightened his grip. "This is for Earth," he muttered, driving a knife deep into the creature's chest. The Sprack warrior let out a guttural scream before it went still. The battlefield fell silent. But the victory was short-lived. Carter's eyes widened as he heard the low rumble of more ships descending from the sky. The Sprack weren't done yet. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the massive Sprack ship landed in the Forsaken ship's hangar. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed throughout the vessel, sending shivers down Carter's spine. He could feel the weight of their situation pressing in on him with every passing second. They were running out of time. The core had given them a temporary advantage, enough power to fend off the initial Sprack wave. But now, more ships were landing. More Sprack warriors were emerging. The Forsaken ship's energy reserves were rapidly depleting, and the Sprack were closing in. The massive new ship in the hangar was just the beginning. More were on the way. "We need to get to the command center, now," Carter barked, his voice sharp with urgency. His team had already been through hell, but they weren't finished yet. Not while Earth's survival still hung in the balance. The corridors were eerily quiet as they sprinted toward the command center. The walls of the Forsaken ship hummed, as if protesting their presence, but Carter barely noticed. His thoughts were entirely consumed by the battle ahead. He knew they had one shot left, one last chance to turn the tide. "Carter," Sergeant Riley's voice was strained. He glanced over his shoulder. "They're everywhere. We don't have the firepower to hold them off for long." Carter didn't answer right away. His mind raced as he thought about their next move. They couldn't keep running. They had to make a stand, and it had to be at the heart of the ship. The command center was their only chance. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the hallway in front of them. sending a shockwave of dust and debris into the air. The Strack were already pushing forward, firing their energy weapons into the walls and taking down anything in their path. "Move, move, move," Carter yelled, pushing his team forward. They had to keep moving. They had to stay ahead of the Strack. The command center was their last hope. As they neared the door to the command center, Carter's hand trembled for a moment, unsure whether they would make it. But there was no time to waste. He slammed his palm against the control panel beside the door. "Open," he shouted. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the central control room. The walls were covered in intricate panels of glowing symbols and strange alien technology. But in the center of it all was the Forsaken ship's central command interface, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with dark energy, as if alive. But there was something wrong. The moment they stepped inside, a voice echoed through the room. "You are too late." Carter's heart froze. The voice wasn't human. It was cold, mechanical, and filled with malice. It was the Strack. Suddenly, the panels along the walls flickered to life. On them, a holographic display of the Strack ships filled the screen. Thousands of ships, each more powerful than the last, were descending on Earth. The Strack were not just here to invade. They had come to wipe out humanity, to exterminate every last person on the planet. They were preparing for total annihilation. "What the hell is this?" Riley demanded, his voice filled with disbelief. The holographic screen shifted, showing the Strack fleet moving into position around Earth. The planet appeared small on the screen, utterly defenseless against the approaching storm. "The Strack are smarter than you think," the voice on the ship's speakers continued, now sounding like a mechanical laugh. "You've merely delayed the inevitable. The Forsaken ship can never match the power of our fleet. We are the end of all things. We are the Strack." Carter felt his blood run cold. The ship, the power they had unleashed, had only been a temporary measure. The real battle was now upon them. But something stirred deep within Carter. The Forsaken had told him they were the last hope of the galaxy, but Carter had never truly believed it. Now, with the Strack fleet closing in, Earth's future depended on him and his team. The central control panel blinked. Carter stepped toward it cautiously. There had to be a way to turn the tide. He reached out and placed his hand on the control interface. For a moment, nothing happened. The hum of the ship's energy filled the room, but the interface remained silent. Then, suddenly, the ship's voice spoke again, this time with a twisted sneer. "You cannot control me, human. You think you can unlock my power. You think you can challenge the Strack." Carter's mind raced. There has to be a way. In that moment, something shifted. A faint memory surfaced, something the Forsaken leader had said to him earlier. Only humans can unlock the core. Carter realized what he had missed. It wasn't just about willpower. It was about humanity's resolve. Earth's greatest strength wasn't their technology. It was their ability to adapt, to never give up. His fingers flew over the interface again, tapping a sequence of commands he didn't entirely understand, but felt compelled to try. As his hands hovered over the final sequence, the entire room began to shake. Was it working? The ship's core responded to his touch. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the heart of the ship, traveling down the walls and floors until it reached the control room. The power surged into the ship's central system, and for the first time, Carter felt the ship respond to his commands. The ship's voice, now twisted with desperation, screeched in a garbled tone. "You fool, you cannot control me. I am the Strack's creation." But it was too late. The control systems were no longer under the Strack's command. Carter had unlocked the ship's full potential. The Forsaken ship, now powered and alive in ways the Strack had never intended, was ready for the fight of its life. "Prepare for the counterattack," Carter shouted, his voice filled with resolve. "We're not losing this fight. Not now." The ship's core flashed with an even brighter energy, and the room was filled with the sound of rising power. Carter could feel the ship's energy surging through him, feeding him strength and purpose. Humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. The room shook as the massive Esprak warlord stepped forward, his hulking form filling the doorway to the command center. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble with his every step. His armor was dark, etched with strange symbols, and his weapon, a massive energy cannon, crackled with violent, raw power. "You truly think you can stop the Sprak?" The warlord's voice boomed, deep and menacing. He raised his weapon, a dark smile twisting his grotesque face. "You will die here, humans. This ship, this power, will belong to us." Carter's pulse raced. He could feel the intense energy of the Forsaken ship pulsing through him, but he knew that this was a battle unlike any other. The ship was ready, but was it enough to defeat a Sprak warlord? The Sprak had already proven how relentless they could be. Their sheer strength had nearly wiped out entire fleets before. The warlord's cannon crackled with deadly energy. He aimed it at Carter. The air was thick with tension. "Move," Carter shouted, diving to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly blast. The energy cannon exploded with a violent flash, sending debris flying in all directions. "Carter," Sergeant Riley yelled, diving for cover behind a console. "We can't hold out against that." Carter didn't answer. His mind was working fast. The Forsaken ship's power, that was their edge. The ship's core wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature. The energy that flowed through it could level entire fleets, but could it really be harnessed against a warlord this powerful? "We need to outsmart him," Carter muttered to himself, eyeing the control panel. "We can't match him in strength, but we can beat him with strategy." The warlord fired again, and this time Carter was ready. He ducked behind a large pillar just as the blast tore through the air. But the heat still singed his arm. His blood surged with adrenaline as he realized something. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for humanity's future. Carter reached out to the console, his hands moving swiftly over the unfamiliar interface. The Forsaken ship's power was like a living thing, and as Carter touched it, he felt the pulse of the ship's energy in his veins. He could feel it calling to him, almost as though it recognized him as its master. "We can use the ship's core energy to blind him," Carter muttered, his mind racing as he configured the controls. "If we overload the shield generators, we can create a shockwave that will disorient him long enough to make our move." "But can we really survive the blast?" Riley questioned, sounding unsure. Carter didn't hesitate. "We have no choice." He slapped a final sequence into the console. The ship's core hummed to life with renewed power, the walls vibrating with energy. Carter heard a whirring sound. The shields were charging. The Sprak warlord turned toward them with a snarl, his eyes glowing with fury. "You're pathetic, humans," he roared, raising his cannon for a third and final attack. "The Sprak will never be stopped." But before he could fire, the shockwave of light and energy burst from the Forsaken ship's core. The room lit up with an overwhelming brilliance, brighter than the sun. The shockwave surged outward, and the warlord staggered, his vision blurred by the intensity of the blast. He roared in fury, but the power of the ship's energy left him disoriented and stunned. Carter took the opening, his instincts taking over. He dashed forward, his gun raised, but it wasn't the weapon that mattered now. It was the power the ship had unlocked inside him. He could feel the connection between himself and the ship, its energy coursing through his veins like fire. "This ends now," Carter shouted as he reached the warlord. The creature staggered, trying to bring his weapon to bear, but Carter was faster. He ducked beneath the warlord's massive arm, dodging another strike, and then, with a primal roar, drove a dagger into the warlord's exposed neck. The warlord howled, stumbling backward as the dagger's energy, drawn from the ship, cut through his armor and into his flesh. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The Sprak warrior's immense form fell to its knees, and with a final defiant roar, the warlord collapsed to the floor, dead. A stunned silence filled the room. "Did we do it?" Sergeant Riley breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Carter didn't respond immediately. He stood over the fallen warlord, his breath coming in heavy gasps, his heart still racing. The battle had been fierce, but they had won this round. They had defeated the Sprack's most formidable weapon. But the victory was bittersweet. The Sprack fleet was still coming. Carter turned to the rest of his team, their faces grim but resolute. The warlord is down, but the war is far from over. We've got one shot left, one final chance to stop the Sprack from destroying Earth. What do we do now? Riley asked. We finish what we started, Carter said, his voice cold with determination. We use this ship. We turn it into the weapon it was meant to be. He turned toward the massive control panel and placed his hand on it, feeling the pulse of the core beneath his fingers. The ship's energy hummed again, more powerfully than before. It was like the ship itself was waiting for him to give the final command. The Sprack were relentless, but they had one thing they would never understand about humanity: the will to fight, no matter the odds. Carter's fingers moved swiftly over the console. He could see it now, an interface that would allow the ship to launch a devastating counterattack, one that could obliterate the Sprack fleet. He entered the final sequence, his heart pounding in his chest. This is it, Carter said. We either win, or we die trying. The ship's core flared to life. The energy surrounding them built to a crescendo. Outside, the Sprack fleet was closing in, ready for the final strike. But this time, they wouldn't be the ones in control. The Forsaken ship was ready. The final battle had begun.